May is right around the corner, and in today's video, we'll be going over some very specific May statistics, also building upon yesterday's analysis for the more short term as well, and what to expect for Bitcoin. And without further ado, we can just jump into it right on over here with Bitcoin on the monthly look. So I've gone through each and every past May of Bitcoin's history, and I've recorded the data both with the just general win rate, whether it's like that it closed positively or negatively, what the average returns versus the average, losing returns have been for those, and then of course recorded the open to low data, which I do want to be getting into today. Now, many people know the age-old saying, which is, of course, sell in May and walk away. And is it literally just that easy? Well, I'll let you decide for yourself, as always. I mean, I just want to be presenting the data, and then you do with that whatever the fuck you want to do. Now, if you can look at the chart right here, we can see that each and every one of these vertical bars, which matches a May in Bitcoin's history, has actually matched up with the starts of some pretty nasty sell-offs. It has also matched up with the start of some pretty epic bull runs, or at least just major runs. So I don't want to make this black and white, because it is not black and white. And in fact, if you really look at the data, sell in May and go away should be taken from like a nuanced perspective. You can't just sell in May and walk away. Of course, when you look at iterations like this from basically 2015 all the way to 2017, all of these were phenomenal buy places, more long term. However, the red vertical bars do indicate the Mays that I would essentially say that, well, that probably was a really good time to be just selling and walk away. We'll go through it right here, and then we'll go through the actual statistics. But you can see this one coming in from 2013 essentially caught the high before a mid cycle correction. Of course, it doesn't look too much on this chart, but that was a 53% move to the downside. So that does deserve some recognition. Of course, in 2014, this was an actual bull trap, and well, Bitcoin was essentially just down only from there after a very slightly new high in June. But again, for the next almost year or half year, things were just fucking down only, basically. And then, of course, in 2018, yet again, May catching the bull trap. If you recall from 2018, April, Bitcoin rallied up to nearly $10,000, and everyone around during the time, I'm sure that they can confirm as well, was saying, "Holy shit, this market's back fucking on again. It's back to 20,000 and beyond." And of course, that was not the case. Bitcoin down only essentially from there. And then again, we do have the one of the more recent Mays from 2021. This one did precede, of course, this mega drop off, about a 50% drop off from 60,000 plus to 30,000. And while it didn't necessarily get like any sort of continuation from there over the next couple months, very little happened over those next couple months as well. So selling in May, was it a good do right here? I would say yes. And then of course, in May of 2022, the bull trap for that cycle, just down only again for the next half year or so. And then from there, we did see the most recent May as a beginning of a more long-term correction. Now, it did close positively, to be fair, but for the next 1, 2, 3 months, price was more or less down, putting in new lows. So if we were to put some numbers on it, I would say 7 out of 14 of the prior Mays have led to significant downside. And out of 4 cycles that we've seen for Bitcoin now, 3 out of 4 of the time we've seen the bull trap and happen at about May. And in fact, I would even say that this should really be 3 out of 3 times, because the 4th time is actually the first cycle for Bitcoin, which is right on over here. And there just wasn't even time for a bull trap. It was a little bit too young. So I would essentially say that for every bull trap that actually existed in Bitcoin's history, yeah, it essentially happened in May, which I do think is very, very interesting. Anyways, let's go through the actual data right here. I do want to first go over just the May monthly, and we did find that 8 out of 14 Mays have closed positively from open to closure. Again, just because it closes positively doesn't mean that a bull trap can emerge, but price action still goes up. And when we look at the average return for both the winning and losing side, now that I recognize it, I have the wrong colors here. Stupid. Anyways, the average loss return was about almost 15%, with the median coming in around 11.5. The average win return for those winning Mays was actually over 30%, and the median coming in much lower, which is probably more accurate for both of these metrics at 1878. So I do think that deserves some recognition here. We can kind of, assume Bitcoin's going to close basically at around here for April, and let's just just play around with these numbers. I'm going to specifically focus on the median just because I think the other one is, I think it's co-opted. I think, I think it's not so accurate. Anyways, median loss return was 11 and a half, and median win return about 19. So let's just see what that would look like. Again, we're going to assume Bitcoin closes somewhere basically here by end of day, because this is indeed the last day. So 11 or so percent to the downside would put Bitcoin where? That would put Bitcoin back to very low $80,000 territory. I still do think that this is actually quite possible. However, it is very much contingent upon Bitcoin's ability to very specifically, as we'll go over later, close below 91,000 bucks, meaning that it's not, actionable as long as Bitcoin's above about 91 on a closing basis, but below 91, okay, yeah, that does seem actually, possible. On the other side, we can look at the positive side, and again, assuming Bitcoin closed somewhere around here, well, what would essentially 18% to the upside look like? That would put Bitcoin on new all-time highs, just above 111,500 Bitcoin's price, right there. Anyways, was that 18 or 19%? Actually, sorry, it's a little bit more than that, probably closer to like 112,000. Anyways, let's now get into some new stuff, and I do want to spend a little bit more time on this. The Bitcoin May open to low data. So what I've done here is I've gone through each and every May and measured the open versus the low of the month, and then I bifurcated that data between positive closing Mays and negative closing Mays. And as usual, this data is, it's kind of what you would expect. Like in positive closing Mays, you don't really see a humongous drawdown. In fact, it's actually, the average is actually about 7%. And I would say that this is being massively influenced by 2011, which, is an early year. I don't know how much it actually matters, to be honest. The median is at 468. If I get rid of these, it brings down the average significantly, and the median actually a decent amount as well, another 25% to about 3%. And then of course, when we go over negative closing Mays, we obviously expect, a greater differential between the open and the low. So for those negative closing Mays, we have seen an average difference of almost 25% from the open to the low. So here's what I want to put in perspective. If you are bullish for May, and if we assume Bitcoin closes somewhere around here, you're really not looking at a humongous pullback to open up the month and still be bullish. 3% off of current price action actually puts Bitcoin at a very, very appropriate price, 91,700, which, by the way, that is nearly exactly in alignment with the 5-day HPDR median right here, which we'll update later tonight. So I imagine that probably does move up a little bit closer to 91.7. Meaning that as long as Bitcoin's above there, upside actually is more likely. Below 91.7, that's when things start to change around. That's when, low 80s, like 83,000 bucks, let's say, becomes a real reality. Real reality. Is that redundant? Probably. Anyways. Okay, I'm actually recording and the microphone's working. That's good. Oh, before we go on, I do want to let everyone know that the quantum wave bands is going to be raising the price, or we're going to be raising the price on the quantum wave band strategy starting tomorrow, May 1st. So this is the last warning, last chance to get in at the lower price. We're going to be raising the monthly from 70 to 90, and we're going to be raising the lifetime from 1,500 to 2,000. And of course, you can still try it out for free, by the way, and you'd actually lock in that lower price. The code is trial in all capitals. And I do want to go over the last trade that it took, because we identified this on yesterday's live stream. It did open yet another long here at 94,000 bucks, and so far in profit by about 800 bucks. It hasn't closed this trade just yet. Personally, when Bitcoin's up against a major region like this, on the precipice of another event as well, like, I think it's better to take the money when it's in your hand, but that's just me. You can trade this however the fuck you want. You can also trade it not at all. But I think it's really, really good to be using, something like the quantum wave bands. In fact, this one's a really, really good one to be referencing as a general sort of call to action to let you know, hey, I have a probabilistic entry here. I don't necessarily have to enter exactly where it says to enter. A lot of the times you can get better entries, and I don't necessarily have to exit exactly where it says to exit, although in a lot of the cases it actually does do a pretty good job on that. And then of course tells you when, to manage your risk as well. And there are very small, minor modifications that you can make. It is intended to be more of like a done for you black box type of thing. But yeah, anyways, enough shilling of that. Again, if you're interested in it, the link is in the description below in Teachable, and you can actually use that same trial code for pretty much all of our indicator packages, which will get you a 30-day free trial, especially for the good old HPDR over here, which is still, I think it's probably one of my most important ones. Anyways, that will come up again later in this video, but now let's move through the rest of it. So daily time frame still is in a precarious place here. I mean, that's just straight up, it's in a precarious place. It's at the exact area that you'd be expecting a rejection and a pullback. If it is going to happen. And if we put on our drawing tools, we can see that, of course, it is right up against this last major high that we saw from 2nd of March in this year. And thus far, despite getting a few wicks above, it is not closed above. And that is officially, let's just call it like 95,300. Depends what exchange you're on, to be fair. But I'm actually on Bybit right here. If we go to the index, for example, that's going to go, to 92.3. Also in alignment with the 618 Fibonacci retracement here, just around 96, to be fair. But basically, effectively the same number. So this is a common pullback region. Again, pullback doesn't necessarily mean like to fucking zero, but or even imply like a real reversal. But a pullback can, like I said, easily come down a little bit below $92,000 to 91.7 or so. And you'd really be expecting a big bounce there if things are going to be bullish. Now, to argue against that side, which I do think is more likely for Bitcoin to play at a pullback here, is that daily time frame has seen stochastic momentum turn down over the past few days. As long as Bitcoin's below $95,000, Bitcoin continues to get rejected right at $95,000. Also in a very, 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 very high positioning here. Something that we haven't seen since November of 2024, that mega rally. The 2-day time frame is also going to be coming under pressure if we can load it. It's going to be taking a little bit of time. Yes, there we go. Yes, the 2-day time frame is also getting up into some pretty crazy regions that we have actually not seen in... you can kind of say from February of last year, but even that I'd say is a little bit lower. Anyways, the pivot right now is $90,000. That pivot will obviously go up upon the new open, which is going to be coming tomorrow. So I imagine that number shoots up probably closer to where Bitcoin's at right now. 3-day time frame, same thing as well. You can see it also traveling well up here, and the 5-day time frame is actually still having a fresh turn. So the lower end of the higher term timeframes is still kind of turning against the higher term timeframes. However, are actually still in favor. So, I do think that Bitcoin could very easily pull back to 91.7, 91.3, something like this, and then actually bounce from there and have a pretty decent May if that does happen. But like I said, 91,700 is a big fucking number. You can see over here on the 5-day HPDR, which I think gets things really fucking well. The median is coming in at 91.3 right now. We will get a new one tomorrow, and I suspect that that's going to move up to about 91.7. That implies that as long as Bitcoin is again above there, it can just be a pullback and then continuation, above 6 digits in May. Next area of interest actually to the upside would be 103, to be fair. Of course, it's going to be, twists and turns along the way, probably around $100,000 as well, but yeah, below the median, however, I would be looking for it to fill out the bottom side of this range. And at that point, low 80s essentially. So, I'm very much open-minded to whichever way happens here, but that's sort of the sort of balancing point bias buster that I'm looking at right now. On top of that, to also give the downside, it's like a short-term downside at least. It's fair due. Obviously, we already know about the moon signal, which everyone loves, but of course the Fibonacci time extension, which is a little bit less controversial, does show a date of relevance coming up very soon here. This Fibonacci time extension has been drawn from the height of the low of the prior cycle and is generally matched up with major highs and major lows for Bitcoin during this cycle. It's not exactly perfect, but it's pretty damn close to the major highs and major lows. You can see these first ones right here. Effectively were the highs of those rallies. This one over here, breakout. This one over here, more so a local high. This one over here, again, very close to the high, but not necessarily the exact high before that mega massive drop off in August. And then of course, this one over here, again, very close to the high, but not the literal high. So we do need to look at this with like a degree of error. And as of right now, the next date of relevance is officially next Tuesday, the 6th of May. So somewhere around this date, whatever direction Bitcoin is approaching this from, you're probably going to see a counter move, because that's typically how it's worked. You rally up into it. Okay, then you pull back from there. You rally up into it over here, pull back from there. You get it. Anyways, because Bitcoin has generally been rallying for the majority of this month into this region, I would have to say that, pullback does seem to me a little bit more likely. That's just me. Anyways. Anyways, again, it's not a death sentence and it's not even a death sentence if you actually lose 91.7 or 91.3, whichever it ends up being upon this next open. But, you know, a pretty decent pullback from there is very much within the cards if it does happen, with the potential for a major, massive bull trap. I mean, it is May after all, so do you have to be defensive against that? But yeah, you know, one thing before the next, and you know, I still think that something like this could very easily happen. You know, Bitcoin spends some time around here, does break below the median, comes down a little bit deeper into this, but spends most of the time actually reaccumulating. And you see this sort of a range occur. This would actually be really, really bullish, in my opinion, more long term. Anyways, to go over the high term timeframes like the monthly, we should be aware the monthly is still living below the median of the HPDR right here. That is officially at 100,000 bucks even. But I'm actually not getting a lot of unique information from this on the monthly specifically. We can also look at the, where is it? Yes, we can look at stochastic momentum. This one is very, very likely going to continue down. This is probably my most concerning signal overall, at least in my opinion. And the pivot is still $106,000. I imagine that will get adjusted again coming into tomorrow's new open. Of course it will. And we'll see what it, you know, comes in around. And also the bi-monthly time frame, very important here. You know, the bi-monthly time frame has actually accurately called all of Bitcoin's highs whenever we've seen it turn to the downside, basically within about a 2-month margin of error. And as of right now, it actually still is to the upside because Bitcoin is above the momentum pivot of 91,000 bucks. We're going to get a new pivot on that one tomorrow, and assuming Bitcoin doesn't come below 91,000 today, which I don't think it will, you know, we'll see where that comes in around, because that would be the next sort of pivot that Bitcoin, at least in my opinion, would need to live above in order to keep Bula hopiums alive. But again, you know, it's getting pretty deep into here, and you know, whether this one turns down in the next couple months or the next 4 months or maybe even the next 6 months, like, it's not going to be that much longer, I don't think. It's just difficult to kind of keep up this level of momentum. Anyways, we'll end with what's newly becoming like my favorite indicator, honestly. And that is, of course, the price action pivots indicator. Maybe not my favorite. I mean, the HPDR has a special place in my heart for that. But this one is just, it's just really fucking good at getting things in such a like simplified manner. But 4-hour price action pivots is showing a current range at 95.5 to the upside versus 93.5 to the downside. So you could essentially define a breakout or breakdown based upon closures above or below these boundaries here, meaning that 4-hour above about 95.5. Okay, you know, that's an early indication that you actually got a real breakout. And then of course below here, 93.5, I think that leads towards your correction down towards, you know, 91.5, let's say, somewhere around there. Again, I do favor the downside in the short term, but I'm not saying that it's going to break below 91.5. That I just want to see, you know, if it does, then we know the next targets. If it doesn't, then bounce and hopium remains alive. Anyways, yeah, the price action pivots indicator, by the way, as well, you can also try this out for free. That same code, trial in all capitals, and getting really good feedback on it, like really, really good feedback on it, especially from newer people, which is what I like to see, because that's really, I mean, it wasn't necessarily designed for newer people, but it's really, really good, I think, for newer people, because it gives you an automated, objective way of defining major highs and major lows, which I think is where most people struggle when they're first starting off. And it's the most important thing, honestly, no matter how experienced you are, like just defining trend and knowing when that trend ends. Very fucking powerful. Anyways, that's enough waffling on for today. I realize that this video is much longer than what I intended for, but that's all right, hopefully, at least. Anyways, I'll be signing off on that note. As always, I want to wish you the best. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully next time.